Let's make a bingo card for board game designers. I made this the other day and I don't really remember what is under each of these squares, so let's reveal each space one at a time together. But let's start with the free space, the guaranteed space that every board game designer has absolutely done, and that is you think you've invented the best game to ever exist. And I'm not saying that this is a bad thing at all. I think it's actually a great thing. If you have delusional optimism, that will be a great superpower for you to have as a board game designer. But it is very important that we keep our feet on the ground, because in reality, it most likely isn't, but it is good to believe in yourself and believe in your games and to be open to feedback and open to criticism and be open to accepting that your game probably isn't the best game to ever be invented. But this is something that almost all board game designers do, so it is a guaranteed free space on our bingo card. So let's reveal another random one here. What's behind this one? Learn your game idea already exists. So this happened to me not that long ago. I thought of this game where you were rolling dice and then depending on what you rolled, you would collect a card and it could either give you points or powers and you would try to level up your cards and your points. But my friend and fellow designer, Nick, told me to look into a game called To Court the King. And so I looked it up on Board Game Geek, here it is. And yeah, it was pretty much exactly what I was trying to do. So yeah, I very quickly forgot about it and moved on. I actually forgot about that game until right now. Learning your game idea already exists will happen to you, but just moving on to something else. But some people will disregard that information and just continue to work on the game. Yeah, I don't recommend doing that. If the game already exists and someone has already done it well, either change your game to make it different enough that it is different from the other game, or just move on to something else. Play 100 different games. I'm sure I've done this, but I only started tracking my games, like my plays, in the Board Game Geek app just a couple months ago. And so, you know, there's very few games listed in there officially. I'm pretty sure I've played 100 different games. But this is such a great thing for designers to do, because it's fun, but also to expose yourself to as many different kinds of games as possible, as many different mechanics, different themes, different everything. And then you can have all this information that you can pull from to make your games with. Obviously, it's great to think of your own completely unique ideas, but that you can get a lot of inspiration from playing a ton of different games and maybe use a little bit from this game and a little bit from that game and put a nice recipe together to come up with something new yourself. Maybe we'll do this one. Name on the front of the box. This is such a huge moment for a designer. I remember when I saw my name for the first time on the front of Hold That Face. That was such a huge moment for me, and I'll never forget that. It's really, really great that publishers more and more are putting the designers' names on the front of the box, as it should be. You don't see books out there that don't have the author's name on the front. Our names should be on the front, period. So seeing my name on the front of the box was a huge, huge moment for me, and it's a great moment for any designer. Let's go down here, add game designer to your Board Game Geek profile. So yeah, you can see here on my Board Game Geek profile, I have game designer here. If you don't have a published game, it doesn't matter. If you're designing games, you're a game designer, you can put the game designer tag on your Board Game Geek profile. How you add that badge to your profile, I can't remember, and to be honest, I find Board Game Geek difficult to navigate, so I would recommend Googling it, figuring out how to get game designer on your Board Game Geek profile 100%. Next one is buy an organizer for your prototyping materials. You know you're serious when you go get a storage case from Walmart and put your board game supplies in there all nice and organized. Instead of having little bits here and little bits there, maybe pulling scissors from your craft supplies or pulling whatever from wherever, when you put them in a box and you get organized, that's always a big moment for a board game designer, because you're taking it maybe a little bit more seriously. You want to easily be able to access the things because you know that you're going to be prototyping often, and you want to make it as easy and accessible as possible. Working on 3+ games at a time. When I first started out, I was hyper-focused on one game for a couple years. And Since then, and learning more about the industry, learning from other designers and getting better as a designer myself, I almost always have like 2 to 3. I think that's about the max for me. But yeah, so I guess this bingo card is for 3+ games, so that's more than 3. I definitely have done that. I don't think I work the best at more than 3. I think that's a bit too much for my brain to handle, and then I feel like some of them will suffer if I have that many games spread out. I feel like when we start out, we're like hyper focused on one game idea that we usually think is the best game to have ever been invented. But then as we grow as designers and we get more and more ideas, then we can multitask, we can have more games on the go, which I do think is great, because taking breaks from games and working on other games, then you have fresh eyes to go back to the other games. And you can probably see things that you might not see if you're so focused and in the weeds on just one game. Join the Pamela's Game Design Discord server. If you're not there already, I definitely recommend joining us over there. We are chatting every day about accountability, like people will post what they want to accomplish that day and then checking to see how they did. We have a Celebrate Your Wins channel now where you can, share any sort of thing that you want to celebrate and share with other people. We also have a members only section. We also have our voice channels. That's where I have the members only streams, Friday night gaming, and our Sunday playtesting. It's free, it's available to you there. It's a great resource to connect with other designers, and I'm there. It's a really fun place to be. It's a fun community, so definitely join that if you haven't yet. Oh, 1-star rating on Board Game Geek. Okay, so let's start with Hold That Face. No, I got a 3. Act Fast. There's not many. There's 2 ratings, and they're both 10. Yay! Blob Party. 4 is the lowest on that one. And Chronicles of Light, some people are rating it already, which is weird because it's not out yet. And they're both very high, which is cool. Seems like this person has played it, so it looks like they've play tested it, so that's cool. So this one I don't have this one on my bingo card yet. I know that a lot of people will throw out a 1-star rating on a game just to balance things out, because I feel like for Chronicles of Light, that one person rated it a 10 and there was no comment, so I don't know if they've actually played it. So then someone might feel like, well, I'm gonna put a 1-star review in there just to balance things out. I haven't played it either, so I'm gonna give it a 1-star. I don't know how people find the time to do these things, or the interest, or like the point, whatever. I don't have this one on my bingo card yet. I am sure I will get one for Chronicles of Light, most likely, because that's going to be the most publicized game that I've made, and so inevitably people will really not like it and give it a 1-star review, or not like something in particular about it, maybe not even related to the gameplay, and give it a 1-star rating. I don't know. And it just happens as a designer, and you just can't get too upset about it. But if it does happen, maybe it'll help me get a bingo, so it's all good. Participate in a game jam. So I participated in a game jam when I still lived in Toronto. This was many, many years ago, when I was very, very first kind of getting more serious about board game design. Me, my sister, and one of my best friends, Amanda, we just heard about, oh, there's a board game jam happening in Toronto. That's so cool. So we went to it, and it was a really cool event. It happened over a weekend. The first Friday, there were some speakers talking about game design and game theory and stuff like that. And then they're just like, all right, go make a game. I don't think there was any parameters. I don't think there was a specific theme or mechanic that you had to do. And then we all met up at the end to show our games to the other students and stuff. So yeah, it was very cool, and it really kind of got me thinking even more about board game design and wanted to get more into it. But I think that's the only game jam that I've participated in. I mean, when I do the videos where I give myself a minute or 10 minutes or whatever to come up with an idea, that's a bit of a game jam. But it would be fun to do it with other people, like the one that I did with my sister and friend. We just came up with our own individual games. We didn't actually collaborate. I would definitely do another game jam. I know that some are hosted at conventions and things like that. People will run game jams, and I think that's a really cool idea, just to work out the creative muscles. I've actually been thinking about possibly hosting a game jam, like an online game jam, over a weekend. So let me know if that's something that would interest you, and I can look into more about organizing something that could be fun. Oh, to have a signed contract be terminated. This is an unfortunate thing that it is fairly rare, but this is when you pitch your game to a publisher, they say they want to make it, they send you a contract, you sign the contract, they sign the contract is signed, but something happens where the publisher decides to terminate the contract. And I do have at least one friend that I know of that this happened to, and it really is unfortunate. It's really, really unfortunate because it's so difficult just to get to that point where you have a signed contract. It's such a huge moment for a designer. To then have it be taken away, that's just brutal. It's brutal. I don't wish this on anyone, and I hope no one crosses off this spot on their bingo card. Not a fun thing. That does happen, but not very often. One last thing I do want to say about this is that this is another reason that I absolutely insist on getting an advance when I sign a contract. It is the standard, but just make sure that you always get an advance, because if a contract is then terminated, you will still keep that advance. Just make sure there's no wording in the contract to say that you would have to pay the advance back if the contract is terminated. That should be your money to keep, even if the publisher decides to terminate the contract. Pitched to 10 plus publishers in one day. Yes, I have done this at least one time. I actually made a video about it. I kind of vlogged while I was pitching to 14 publishers in one day. And that was a lot. It was a lot, but it's great practice. It's absolutely fantastic. If you can sign up to a speed pitch event, I 1000% think that's a great idea, because it's just great practice in general, getting used to pitching, and you'll get great feedback from a publisher's perspective. And so even if you don't get a game picked up from it, it is always a great thing to do. It's almost always free. There's a lot of online speed pitching events that happen. If I ever hear about a speed pitch event, I always include it in my weekly newsletter. So be sure to sign up to that so that you get notified about these events. But especially as a new designer, they are incredibly helpful to network, to meet publishers, to get that feedback, to get your name out there, all these sorts of things. See your game on clearance. Womp womp. This happened to me a couple weeks ago. I saw Act Fast on the clearance table at Toys R Us. It was a bit of a sad moment. Like, it was marked down and it was just sitting there with a bunch of other random things on the table. It's just part of the game life cycle. It's fine. I'm fine. Knowing that I had a game in a store at all is amazing. Playtesting your game with strangers. I remember the first time I did this was at Snakes and Lattes in Toronto at a designer meetup. Up until then, I had only playtested with my friends and family, and they are amazing playtesters. They're still my primary playtesters. I love playtesting with them, but it's also great to get perspectives from strangers and people you aren't close with or you aren't friends or family with. It's just great to get all kinds of different perspectives. It's not necessarily that strangers give better feedback. They just might give a different perspective. So I know it can be scary, absolutely, to playtest your games with strangers, and sometimes they can be not very nice, but push through it, playtest with as many different kinds of people as possible, and your game will benefit from it. Didn't make any comments about strategy during a playtest. This is a tough one to be able to cross off on your bingo card because we do this a lot. It is so hard to not suggest what players should do on their turn during a playtest of your game. You really want to see how players interact with their game, the decisions that they make, without you interfering, because you won't be there when other people are playing the game if the game gets published to suggest different things or whatever. And you want to see what might not be clear to players that they can do on their turn, or different strategies that are available to them. If these things aren't clear and you have to point them out to players, then that is an issue with how the game is communicated. I would like to believe that I've been able to do this, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure I have. I would like to think that I have, but you know what? I'm not going to cross this space off until I'm 100% sure. So the next play test I do, I'm not going to say a word about strategy. Attend a playtesting convention. This is such a great moment for designers. I remember my first one, it was called Prototype Con in Orlando, Florida, and I was so excited, I was so nervous. It was such a cool event, and I absolutely was fully into this whole board game design thing after going to that. If you can, attend a playtesting convention like Unpub, Protospiel. There are a lot of local playtesting conventions with all different kinds of names, so just Google it and try to find it. I also include playtesting conventions in my weekly newsletter, so that would be a good thing to sign up to as well if you're not getting that already. Your game reviewed by Dice Tower. This is a pretty big moment and it can be a scary moment because Dice Tower can be a tough crowd. You never know. They might absolutely hate your game. They might love it. They're usually not too much in between those two extremes. I was very stoked to see the Dice Tower review Blob Party a few weeks ago and actually liked it. So to get the Dice Tower seal of approval is very cool. It can be very scary if they don't like your game, but hey, even if they don't like your game, you can still cross this space off on your bingo card. But just having your game reviewed by Dice Tower at all is a good thing because they have such a far reach. I mean, it's unfortunate if they don't like your game, and they can have a pretty big impact on people, I think, whether people will buy the game or not, which is unfortunate. And that's why I definitely steer away from doing reviews of games. I don't want to be the reason that a designer makes less royalties, less copies are sold because of my opinion. Hold your published game in your hands like this. Ah, this feeling never gets old. It's so cool to be able to hold a game in your hands that you have worked on for so long and to see it all nice and shiny. There's the back. Unfortunately, in this game, my name is not on the front, but it is on the back. Submit your game to a game design contest. I have done this, I think once. I can't remember the name of the contest. It was for a party game. It was for Hold That Face, actually, when it was called Just Face It. It got some pretty harsh feedback, and it was pretty clear that a lot of the judges just didn't like party games because that game was picked up by Hasbro and published, so there obviously was something there. I didn't get a ton of helpful feedback, and I did have to pay for that contest. Yeah, I haven't really sought out contests since then. You know, I've been a judge for the Cardboard Edison Award. I do think you can get valuable feedback if the judges put in the effort to write out their thoughts. I personally don't really seek out game design contests, and one of the reasons too is that a lot of them, they don't allow you to pitch those concepts to publishers while it's under review at the contest, and I'm constantly pitching games to publishers, and so I don't want to have that restriction. But it's definitely something I would maybe consider in the future. Create a digital prototype for your game. You can use programs like Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator to create a digital version of your prototype. I really started learning these programs during COVID when you couldn't really playtest in person, and so you had to mainly playtest online, and so that was a great opportunity to learn how to make digital prototypes. It is a lot to learn, but it is a great skill to have for designers. I do personally recommend Tabletopia over Tabletop Simulator. I find it more intuitive and easier to use and to get going, much less steep learning curve than Tabletop Simulator. Just be careful when you start making digital prototypes that you don't get so obsessed about how your game looks on the screen and all the different cool little components you can add to it. Just make sure the focus is still on the gameplay and making sure it's a great game. And because it's a lot more effort to make a digital prototype than a physical prototype, sometimes it can become almost more precious and you don't want to change things maybe as easily. You might be reluctant because I just put so much work creating this digital prototype. I don't want to then start all over and make a whole new one. And so it is a good skill to have, but we need to still always focus on the gameplay and not how the game looks. Of course, it can be fun to make your game look good, absolutely, but just being cautious of how much time we're spending on that and just keeping the priority on making sure the game is actually fun to play. Ghosted by a publisher who said they would sign your game. Yes, I might be speaking from experience. I know I've complained about this before, so I'm not gonna go on a huge tirade here, but yes, a publisher said that they were going to sign my game, and they said they were just working on putting the contract together for 2 years, dragging it on and on and on until I eventually said, and I should have done this sooner than, I shouldn't have let it drag on for 2 years, but I eventually said, this obviously isn't going to happen, please mail my prototype back. But now they are on my list of people I don't want to work with because, you know, it is a two-way street. It's not just like do whatever you can to the infallible publishers and they will grace you with choosing your game. You're also choosing them. And there are some publishers that, yeah, I don't want to work with and I won't be working with moving forward, and they are one of them. So that was definitely unfortunate. Things that I learned from that is to not let things drag out that long. Like I tried giving deadlines to the publisher, be like, if I don't get the contract by the end of June, I will need to move on. And then they kept just being like, oh, I just need a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer. I should have like stayed true to that deadline. But especially when you're still kind of new and it's the only publisher maybe that has expressed interest in actually publishing that game. If a publisher is that flaky and dragging things on that much, that really tells you all you need to know. 2+ years between signing a contract and having a game be released. So that will be this one. Contract signed 2022, game released 2024. And that is a long time, but that is fairly common because a lot of publishers will book up their lineups a couple years into the future. And so when they sign a game with you, it might not come out the next year, it'll come out the year after, or maybe even the year after, which is unfortunate because that means there'll be another 2 years before you possibly get a royalty check. The board game industry definitely moves fairly slow. And, you know, for like some games, they might be planned to come out the following year, but then because of whatever circumstances, it could be pushed, and that's completely out of your control. Do an unguided playtest. This is such an important thing for designers to do. So this basically means that you're going to give a group of players your game and your rules, and you're going to leave the room, or you're going to sit there and like actually not say anything. But it's really best if you're just not there. And you can record it, or you can FaceTime into it, or just talk to the playtesters after. So this is the best way to see how clear your rules are, to see what's not clearly communicated, and just to keep in mind that this is really, you only really do this once your game has been thoroughly play tested. Like normally, it is pretty much almost in its final state, and now you're really just making sure the rules are clear. So don't be doing unguided play tests at the start. The majority of your play testing, you will be there to clarify things, to answer questions, to explain the game, all those sorts of things. Rejected by a publisher on your birthday. This is very specific. Maybe because it happened to me 2 weeks ago. I was out with my best friend having a great day. I got my Denny's Grand Slam, my free Denny's Grand Slam. We went to a board game cafe and I played Everdell, which is one of my favorite games right now. We did an escape room. We got pizza. It was a fantastic day. I don't know why I decided to check my email during it, but I saw I got an email. I opened up my email and yeah, it was the status of your game has changed to dropped. And I wasn't surprised at all. I had a feeling that was going to happen, but yeah, it was on my birthday. I hope you get a bingo another way. And the last one is subscribe to the Pamela's Game Design YouTube channel. You're here already, you might as well hit subscribe. I make videos like this all the time about board game design, about my journey as an independent board game designer. If you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe if you want. No pressure. So if you want to play along and fill out the bingo card yourself, I'll include a link to the PDF in the description below. Now let's see my bingo card. Bingo!